Hi, nice to see you. This year I read a lot more books than I would normally do in a year. I read around 30 books this year and I'm just really happy and I'm really excited to share with you my favorites. I made a list. Wait, I swear I did a list on my Notion. I'm so happy! Okay, so for this video I won't be talking about all of the books, like all 30 books, because that's just too much for me. So I narrowed it down to 17. So we're going to rank all of the books that I picked out for this. And okay, let's start. So all the way at the bottom we have this book, and this was a book that was all around Booktok. It's a YA and people just seem to really like it. And this book is Normal People by Sally Rooney. So this book is, I'm gonna read my notes. Okay. So it's a coming of age book following Connell and Marianne, and they have this whole complicated relationship, but for some reason after high school and after college they just keep getting drawn back to each other. So it is a YA, and I don't know, I wasn't really into the book as much as other people, that's why it's at the bottom. But there's a lot of mixed comments about this book. And maybe it's because I'm not really into YA books anymore, but I really was when I was in high school. Like, you can see the Fault in Our Stars in this file. I've owned that since high school, so yeah. Next book. So the next book is another book that I saw on Booktok, and I was drawn to the plot because it reminded me of a movie starring Blake Lively, The Age of Adeline. And this book is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I need my notes, I can't anymore. The plot is, so we're following Addie, the protagonist, and after running away from her own wedding, she makes a deal with the devil. And the consequences, which she didn't know about, is she'll be living forever and she's cursed to be forgotten by everyone she meets. But, this is what hooked me, but all of that changed around 300 years later when she met this boy who remembered her name. So I'm like, interesting. So yeah, that's my 16. Next, so this book, it was given to me as a gift from my friend, and it was turned into a series. It also has a movie, but I was really into the BBC adaptation of this book, and that is Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This particular publication has 2 volumes. This one, and volume 2 is this is volume 2, volume 1, volume 2. I've only read volume 1. I mean, like, look at that. It's so thick. This is the first 1,000 page book that I finished, like, ever. So I read the first volume, and the first volume contains a lot of famous cases. Studying Scarlet, The Sign of 4, what else? 5 Orange Tip, and a lot more cases by those two, and I really enjoyed it. It took me around 3 weeks to finish this book, and I'm really happy with it. Hey, this next one, it's a trilogy. And after I completed my Goodreads challenge this year, I wanted to start reading, trilogies or book series type books, and this is the first thing that came into my mind, and that book is The Crazy Rich Asians trilogy. So I watched the movie first, of course, in the cinema, and I really liked it, and I found out that it was a book, so okay, I put it on my TBR, and it's been there for like 2 years. The first book is about this boyfriend-girlfriend couple, Nick Young and Rachel Chu. So Nick invites Rachel back to his home in Singapore to attend his best friend's wedding. But apparently, this best friend's wedding is actually the wedding of the year in Singapore. So Rachel is about to get the culture shock of her life. Nick is actually a son of one of the wealthiest families in Singapore. So if you watch the movie, you know how the rest of the story will go. But yeah, I really like the trilogy, and God, I can't believe that you could stay mad at a single character for 3 books. It's Michael Teo, but like, oh my God. Next, I did not know that this movie existed up until I watched the movie. I had no idea what it was about, but I only watched it because the leading guy is Timothy Chalamet, and that book is Call Me By Your Name. So it's a romance, contemporary, LGBT. So this book, it's about a sudden romance between Elio and Oliver. So every few months, Elio and his family have a house guest which helps with the dad's work. And for that time, Oliver was the house guest, and I guess Oliver was a really special house guest to Elio for that like 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. Go read it. I liked it. Next is another fiction book, and this was a Netflix series, and it really got a lot of hype. So I only knew that it was a book because one of the Booktok readers that I follow showed this book, and he was reading this book, and I was like, oh! And the book is Queen's Gambit by Walter Tevis. So if you haven't watched the series on Netflix, this story is about an orphan named Beth Harmon. So the story follows an orphan, Beth Harmon, and she becomes a chess prodigy. Later on, she eventually tops the US chess rankings. But I'm just going to say that the series was faithful to the book in some parts, but I do get why they added some certain scenes in the series just to make it more, you know, dramatic and whatnot. But the book is really nice, and you get to understand Beth more when it comes to the pills, the green pills that she used to steal, right? Okay, the next book is another fiction, and I saw this book around Booktok again, and that book is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And actually, I was also drawn to this book because of the cover. Like, that's so pretty. Like, what's that? So this book is about a girl named Nora Seed, and she's in a coma. But she's transported to this library with a number of books on the shelves, and each book contains a life that she could have lived if she made other choices in her own life. It's beautiful. It's really nice, and it makes you think about, you know, the life choices, and if you didn't do this, what sort of life would you have lived? And you know, it's nice. Read it. Now we are in the top 10 portion. Woo! Coming in at the top 10, it's not a fiction book, it's a sort of self-help book. And this book, I read this every morning, and that book is The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. In this book, for each day, there is a dedicated quote by a famous Stoic, and Ryan Holiday provides an explanation to that quote and the sort of context, and it helps me understand the quote more and the underlying message that it's trying to convey. It's a good way to start my day because, you know, I'm thinking about something here, pondering about something because of this book, and sometimes I read it before I journal, but sometimes after I journal also. This 9th book is a book recommended to me by my friend, and it's actually banned in certain countries. And this book is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. And this book is beautiful in a sense that there's no filter, like the main character here, no filter. He just blurts out everything that's in his head, and it's the book is about this boy. He is a 16-year-old, and his name is Holden Caulfield, and he just tells us anything that comes into his mind. And the entire book takes place in around 2 to 3 days, and we're just following him and all his adventures. At the beginning of the book, we find out that he gets kicked out from school again. But instead of going straight home to his parents, he goes on a little adventures around, I think, New York before going home to tell the bad news to his parents. Next, this book was already hyped up even when I was in high school. So that was around 2017 to earlier years. And when I was in high school, I remember seeing my friends in the classroom just reading this book. And that book is The Song of Achilles. I can't believe I just read it this year. But The Song of Achilles is basically a retelling of Homer's Iliad in the point of view of Patroclus until the Trojan War. The whole story surrounds Patroclus and his relationship with Achilles. Read it. Oh my god. Nice book. Great read. Read it. Okay. So this is the 7th book. It was also adapted into a film and it's one of my favorite films of all time. It's a romance film, but I never got around to reading this book until this year. And that book is A Walk to Remember by Nicholas Sparks. I read this book in one sitting, like just an entire afternoon, and I finished the book. I mean, like, it's around 200 plus pages, I think, but I just kept on reading it. It's like, and I kept crying the same way that I cried when I watched the film. This book is about this boy named Landon, and he retells the story of his senior year in high school where he falls for this girl, Jamie Sullivan, which is the last girl that a popular guy would fall for in high school, you know, those type of dynamics. And 6th book is an autobiography. It was recommended to me by a friend, and God, I read it in 2 days, and at the latter part of the book, I could not stop crying. As in, it was 12 midnight, I remember this. It was 12 midnight, I couldn't stop crying because the book was just so sad. And that book is My Breath Becomes Air. Okay, so this book, as I said, is an autobiography or memoir of the author. So this story is, he was at the end, finally after like a decade of his training as a neurosurgeon, you know, so 10 years of medical school and practice, almost done. But then he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And it was completely devastating for him receiving this news. And overall, he attempts to answer the question, what makes a life worth living? But okay, we are in the top 5 questions! Okay, this 5th book. I found out about this book because I saw my friends on Goodreads, you know, reading it, and they rated it really high. They even gave reviews, and they said that it was absolutely heart-wrenching. And that book is The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. The Kite Runner, it's set in Afghanistan, and it's about Amir, a wealthy boy, and Hassan, the son of their family servant. And it's a powerful story about family, friendship, love, and it's told against the backdrop of the devastating history of Afghanistan over the last 30 years. I felt so bad for Hassan when I read this book. Coming in at the 4th place is a self-help book. And this book, actually, I first found out about it in one of Jen M's book reviews. So, this book is Atomic Habits by James Clear. In this book, James Clear teaches strategies not only about forming good habits but also breaking bad ones. And it served as the foundation of how I've been going about my life or my lifestyle ever since this year started. I'm going to talk more about it with this next book coming in at 3rd place. And I also found out about it thanks to beautiful mom, Jen M. And that book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I picked up this book because at the beginning of the year, and around March, I was trying to form good habits for myself and integrate it into my lifestyle. One of which was reading a book, like reading at least a few pages of a book every morning, every day. Like, look at me now, look at that. It helped me, and I finally got to my goal, which was reading 24 books in a year. So this book really paved the way for me this year, and it's something that I want to read next year and eventually at least once a year. Yeah, I highly recommend this book. Just take it. Okay, book number 2. It's a classic, it's fiction, and it's philosophical, and that book is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. The Alchemist is about an Andalusian boy. He's a shepherd boy, and his name is Santiago. And he travels from his homeland in Spain to the Egyptian desert in search for a treasure near the pyramids. When I first read the synopsis, I was wondering, like, how is this book philosophical and how did this become, a classic? Like, look at that. They even have an anniversary edition special. It's a beautiful story and one that you would reread. Basta! I swear, I promise, I put this as my second book for a reason. Read it, okay? Read it. Made it. I can't believe that I only read this book this year. It was another recommendation by my friend. Though I have watched the film already on TV. Coming in at number 1 for my 2021 book reads is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. So The Perks of Being a Wallflower is a story about Charlie. He narrates his story to us, like all of his dilemmas and his life as a high school student through these letters, starting with Dear Friend, and we don't know who he's actually writing to, but in the end, after you read this book, you will find out who he's actually writing to. How it's written, how the story is told, it just makes it really beautiful. And I've read this twice already this year. After reading it for the first time, I watched the movie right away. And after telling my friends about it, they also watched the movie again, and it's such a great book. Yeah. Top 1 for this year. Okay, that's all. I hope that you were able to, find a few good books that you would want to read for maybe next year. And yeah, thanks for your time, and I'm gonna finish my drink now, and